Harsh screams, the pounding of heavy boots, and the sound of a body hitting the ground tore through the peaceful stillness of the farm. Eamon burst outside, his heart nearly stopping at the sight before him. His grandfather, Silas Ryland, was surrounded in the courtyard by Vernon Hale and 20 thugs. They were beating him with rifle butts, kicking him in the chest, and dragging him across the ground like he was nothing more than a lifeless object. Silas struggled to stand, blood streaming down his cheek, his voice hoarse and strained. "This land is not for sale." The words made Vernon laugh with pure disdain. "Old man, I am giving you exactly 10 days. If you do not sign the papers, I will come back and finish this." Then he nodded a signal. 2 of his men threw a rope over the branch of the old oak tree in the front yard. Before Eamon could reach them, they had already grabbed Silas by the legs, yanked him upside down, and left him hanging, head dangling toward the ground. Blood dripping steadily, Eamon screamed, his voice cracking from horror. "Stop! He is an old man. You are going to kill him." Vernon just shrugged, brushing off the plea like it was a passing breeze. "Whether he lives or dies is up to him. Not me." They walked away laughing, their cruel voices echoing, leaving Eamon shaking as he scrambled up to cut the rope. When Silas dropped, his body was limp, his breath so faint it felt like a gust of wind could carry it away. Eamon cradled his grandfather, his tears mixing with blood, and in that desperate moment, he remembered the debt of honor his grandfather had once spoken of, the one debt that might be able to save them now. As soon as he finished bandaging his grandfather's wounds, Eamon knew he had no other choice. Silas was breathing faintly, like a flame on the verge of going out, and the 10-day deadline Vernon Hale had given them felt no different from a death sentence. If Eamon did not act now, his grandfather would die, and the Ryland farm would disappear from the map of this harsh western land. Under the flickering light of the small kitchen's oil lamp, Eamon recalled the story his grandfather had once told. Years ago, during a devastating flood downstream, Silas had rescued an Apache boy, carrying him across the raging waters with nothing but his worn-out arms. That boy was Calder, the son of the tribal chief, and Silas had said only one thing: "Not because you are Apache, but because you are a drowning human being." Eamon had never imagined that debt would ever need to be repaid, but tonight, with his grandfather lying there gasping for breath after being strung up in a tree, he understood. This was their last hope. Eamon packed a few pieces of dry bread, a water pouch, a rusty knife, and an old gun into his saddlebag. He looked at his grandfather one last time, gently brushed back Silas's silver hair, and rode off without a word. Night had fallen. The desert wind scraped at his face like claws. The road to Apache territory would take more than 2 days on horseback, crossing barren mountain ranges and treacherous ravines where a single misstep could erase a man without a trace. But Eamon did not hesitate. He spurred the horse forward as if his very life depended on every gallop. The first night, he set up camp near the edge of a dry creek. He slept in fits, constantly stirred awake by distant howls of wolves. Exhaustion dragged at his eyelids, but each time he thought of Silas hanging upside down from that tree, the nightmare jolted him back to alertness. By the second day, the sun scorched so fiercely it blistered his skin. His water ran low, his lips cracked, and his throat burned with every breath. Even his horse was panting. But when he finally spotted the rows of Apache flags flapping along the distant mountainside, Eamon felt his heart pound with new strength. However, the moment he set foot on tribal land, a sharp whistle pierced the air, followed by an arrow stabbing into the ground right in front of his horse's hooves. From behind the rocks, 4 Apache warriors emerged, their faces painted in solemn war patterns, bows drawn tight and ready. Eamon dropped to his knees instantly, raising both hands, his voice trembling but clear. "Please, let me see Calder. My grandfather is Silas Ryland. He once saved Calder's life during the Great Flood." The warriors exchanged glances. One gave a signal. Eamon's eyes were blindfolded, and he was led away. In the darkness, his heart pounded not from fear of the Apache, but from the fear that he might have come too late to save his grandfather. When the blindfold was removed, Eamon found himself standing in the middle of a massive ring of fire, surrounded by dozens of Apache warriors. The hide tents stretched upward like towering shadows across the red earth. Ritual drums echoed in deep, steady beats that made his heart thump in rhythm. An elder warrior spoke. "White man, You said you came to see Calder. Give your reason." Eamon took a deep breath and dropped to his knees again. "My grandfather, Silas Ryland, is dying. He was hung upside down and beaten nearly to death by Vernon Hale and 20 thugs. I asked to see Calder because he once said he owed his life to my grandfather." The air around the fire went still. Then, from behind the warriors, a tall figure stepped forward. He stood with quiet authority, broad shoulders, and eyes that burned like fire in the night. It was Calder, now a leader, carrying the presence of a man forged by countless battles. He looked at Eamon for a long time, his voice deep and steady like the mountains. "I remember Silas Ryland. I remember the trembling hands that pulled me from death. I remember his voice saying, 'Live.'" Eamon bowed his head, his voice choked with emotion. "Please, help my grandfather. I cannot protect him alone. Only your people can stop the Hales." Calder stepped forward and placed a hand on Eamon's shoulder. The gesture held both acknowledgement and the weight of duty. "Silas saved my life without asking for anything. I am Apache. I do not forget a debt of honor." Then Calder turned and raised his hand high. A horn sounded immediately, long and sharp like a predator calling its pack. From every corner of the camp, Apache warriors surged forth, quickly forming ranks like a storm, ready to descend upon the valley. Not 10, not 100, but 500 warriors' faces painted in war colors. Long spears, wooden bows, and leather shields adorned with eagle feathers. A force so vast that the ground trembled beneath their steps. A young warrior looked at Eamon, wide-eyed in disbelief. "Boy, for one white man, our chief summons 500? That is no ordinary thing." Calder stepped into the center of the army, his voice thundering. "Today, we repay the debt of Silas Ryland." He turned to Eamon. "Stand up. From now on, you will ride with us." Eamon rose, his legs trembling slightly, but his heart ablaze with a new fire, a fire of hope he thought he had lost forever. Before the sun could even rise, the entire Apache camp stirred like a massive beast waking from slumber. Horses neighed loudly, saddles were tightened, and the rustling of leather armor echoed like a warning of an impending march unlike anything ever seen. Eamon stood amidst it all, feeling as if he were being pulled into the eye of a gathering storm. Calder mounted his bronze-colored warhorse, a headdress of eagle feathers atop his head, a mark of the commander. He raised his hand, and 500 Apache warriors moved as one. The discipline sent chills down Eamon's spine. The army set out just as the first light of dawn kissed the horizon. Morning sunlight caught the war paint on the warriors' faces, making them look like spirits stepped out of ancient legend. Eamon rode a horse Calder had given him, moving within the formation like a part of the force. Steep cliffs, narrow ravines, and wild hills did nothing to slow the Apache. They moved through it all light as wind, powerful as crashing waves. Eamon had never seen any army move so swiftly, so silently. Along the way, a warrior named Yaska glanced over at Eamon and said, "You white men have guns and laws. But we, Apache, we have something else. A promise." Eamon swallowed hard. He understood now that the only thing driving this march was the debt of honor owed to his grandfather, a kind of loyalty that had become as rare as water in the desert among the world of white men. By midday, the army halted atop a high cliff, from which they could look down into the valley where the Ryland farm sat, small and distant. Calder stood with arms folded at the edge, his eyes sharp as a blade. "The Hales think Silas has no one standing behind him." He turned to Eamon, but they were wrong. Eamon gripped the reins tightly, his chest tightening at the thought of his grandfather lying there, waiting for death. But within him, hope began to rise strong enough to drown out fear. As the sun began to dip westward, Calder raised his hand. "Tomorrow," he said, solemnly, "if blood is spilled, we have failed our debt of honor." Eamon looked at the 500 Apache warriors standing ready behind him, and he understood that tomorrow, justice would come to the Ryland farm like a storm nothing could stop. "Thank you so much for being here. If this story brings back memories of the old days, the red dusty afternoons, the sound of horses' hooves echoing in your heart, subscribe to my channel, so that every day we can sit together and I can tell you another Western story." The next morning, the prairie lay beneath a thin veil of mist as Vernon Hale and his 20 henchmen rode toward the Ryland farm. They laughed loudly as they went, smug in the belief that victory was already theirs. To them, Silas Ryland was nothing more than a stubborn old man. And one night strung upside down must have shattered both his will and his strength. "Tie the rope," Vernon said, his voice tinged with a cruel delight. "We are not collecting papers today. We are collecting a corpse." His men burst into laughter, the sound wild and brutal as it echoed across the open field. One of them added, "Hope the old man's still breathing. Killing a dying man is no fun at all." They rode past the shattered fence they had broken the week before. The ranch gate creaked in the wind like a mourning cry. The main house stood silent, windows shut tight, no sign of life. Vernon spat onto the ground. "Look at that. One little scare and they're already hiding like rats." He signaled to two of his men, "Search the place. If you find the boy, grab him first. I want Silas to watch his grandson die before it's his turn." The two thugs kicked the door in and rushed inside, only to find an empty house. No tracks, no noise, not even a breath. "He ran!" they shouted. Vernon frowned. The corner of his mouth curled. But this time, not into a triumphant grin this time. It was irritation. Running won't help. In this God-forsaken land, no one's dumb enough to hide him. His men began spreading out across the yard, scanning for footprints, stomping their boots into the dry ground. One of them pointed to the old oak tree where Silas had once been hung. "There's still blood here. We should finish it right here." Vernon slowly pulled his Colt from its leather holster, spinning the cylinder like a man bored by a task he considered already done. But just as he opened his mouth to give the order, a strange, cold gust swept across the yard. The horses began to twitch and stomp, uneasy. The sky, clear only moments ago, seemed to darken. One of the men looked up, frowning. "Boss, do you hear that?" Vernon turned, ready to snap at him. But then he heard it too. A faint rustling, like hundreds of dry leaves swirling in the wind, coming from all four directions at once. None of Hale's men knew that just a few hundred yards away, 500 Apache warriors were tightening the circle, ready to descend like a storm and wipe out every trace of the evil Vernon believed he could bury beneath these skies. The strange sound grew louder and louder, like an underground wave, rising from deep within the earth. The Hale gang's horses began to shift anxiously, neighing in confusion. Some of the thugs tightened their reins, eyes darting. But none of them understood what was coming. Then an Apache war horn blared long, cold, and sharp as a blade slicing the sky. The Hale men jolted. Vernon spun around, squinting toward the eastern ridge. At first, there were only a few figures, but within seconds, the entire horizon began to move. Row after row of Apache warriors burst from the ridge on horseback, leather cloaks flying, red and black war paint across their faces, long spears held upright. Behind them came the archers, then cavalry carrying round shields carved with the image of an eagle. The number was beyond counting. One thug shouted, his voice cracking in terror. "Dear God, what are they doing here?" Not 100, but 500 Apache warriors, shoulder to shoulder, forming a massive ring around the entire Ryland farm. Dust rose in thick clouds under pounding hooves, and the earth trembled with each step, pushing the Hale gang to the brink of despair. Eamon rode among the front cavalry, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched Vernon's face twist from arrogance into sheer panic. Calder spurred his horse forward, riding alone into the open space. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. The power of 500 warriors behind him was enough to unnerve any army. His voice rang out, deep, steady, and cold as stone. "Vernon Hale." Vernon flinched at the sound of his name. "You tied an old man to a tree, beat him nearly to death, threatened his grandson, and you believed this land belongs to the strongest." Calder nudged his horse forward, his gaze sharp as a spear. "But here is what you fail to understand." He raised his hand, and 500 warriors lifted their weapons in perfect unison. The sound of metal and leather clashing sent chills down every spine. The Apache keep their word with the strength of an entire tribe. Then Calder lowered his hand, his voice rumbling like thunder. "Touch the Ryland family again, and we will follow you to the edge of the world." Vernon trembled so badly his gun slipped from his hand. One of his men broke down in tears. Others turned and ran, some dragging their horses behind them. some tossing away their hats and guns to flee faster. And in that chaos, Aemon stood still. He did not fire a shot. He did not draw a blade. The presence of 500 warriors was enough to end the evil. After the Hale gang scattered like a pack of animals chased to the edge of survival, the wide courtyard of the Ryland farm fell into an eerie silence. Not a silence of fear, but one of solemn majesty, as if the very sky and earth were bowing in respect to the presence of 500 Apache warriors. Calder turned and gave a signal. The archers spread out to scout the area. The cavalry swept along both flanks, and the medicine carriers moved swiftly toward the main house. Aemon rushed inside without hesitation. "Grandpa, I brought help. You are going to be all right." Silas still lay there, on the old wooden bed, his breath faint, but his eyes had begun to open. When he saw the silhouettes of Apache warriors filling the doorway, he flinched for a moment, then recognized Calder. Calder stepped forward, standing beside the bed. "Old man," he said, voice low and steady. "You pulled me from death once. Now, it is my turn to repay that debt." Silas managed a faint smile. "Thought I had to die first before you'd show up." Calder let out a quiet laugh, and Aemon choked up. Immediately, 2 Apache women healers stepped in. They removed the bandages, examined the bruised and battered wounds, and applied a pungent herbal salve that made Silas wince slightly. But within minutes, his fever began to break, and his breathing evened out. Outside, the warriors began repairing the damage, mending the shattered fence, reinforcing the gate, clearing away broken wood, even digging out the well that the Hales had filled with dirt. 500 people worked like an organized wind. No need for orders or questions, only glances and instinct. A young warrior handed Aemon a sharp knife and said, "A man must know how to protect his home. But tonight, you will not need this. We will stand guard." Night fell. Apache campfires burned bright around the ranch, forming a glowing red ring of protection in the dark. Aemon sat at the doorstep, watching the firelight gleam off spears and arrowheads. This was not a scene of war. It was the image of a tribe of guardians protecting his home. When the moon reached its peak, Calder came to sit beside Aemon. "You did what many grown men would not dare," he said. "You crossed our lands alone. To save someone." Aemon clenched his fists. "I could not let my grandfather die. I just did what had to be done." Calder nodded, his gaze softening. "And because of that, we are here." Aemon looked out across the ring of fire, where 500 Apache warriors sat in silence, listening to the wind move across the prairie. For the first time in his life, he felt safe, truly safe. 3 days later, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, its golden light spilled across the prairie like warm honey. The 500 Apache warriors had completed their mission. The Ryland farm was no longer a trampled wasteland. It had become a peaceful fortress, clean, steady, and stronger than it had ever been. Silas could now sit up. His body still ached, but his eyes were full of life. He leaned against the headboard, watching the Apache warriors prepare to leave, with the quiet understanding of a man who had just received a gift greater than life itself. Calder entered, carrying a small leather pouch. "It is time for us to return," he said gently. Aemon stood beside his grandfather, unable to hide his disappointment. "You are leaving so soon?" Calder smiled the smile of a man who had lived long enough to understand how the world works. A guardian should stay only until the danger has passed. Stay too long, and the one protected forgets how to stand. He opened the pouch and took out an oval, shaped gray stone, its surface etched with a sharp blade in the shape of an ancient Apache symbol. An eagle's wings spread wide. The morning light hit it just right, making the stone softly glow. Calder placed it in Aemon's hand. "This is Tosahan, the stone of promise." Aemon looked at it, emotion rising in his chest. What am I supposed to do with it?" Calder placed a strong, warm hand on his shoulder. "Keep it close. When you carry it, you carry the strength of an entire tribe." Silas shifted, his voice still hoarse but steady. "Calder, I do not even know how to thank you." Calder shook his head. "Silas Ryland, you saved me when I was just a child. Today, We have only returned what should have been repaid long ago. Outside, the warriors gathered. The rhythm of hoofbeats rang out across the earth, their formation tight as massive spears pointed toward the distant mountains. Before mounting his horse, Calder turned one last time. Eamon, from this day on, you are no longer the boy who ran from evil. You are the one who stood to protect your family. Hold on to that. Eamon clenched the stone in his hand, feeling its weight light in his palm, but heavy with honor, loyalty, and the burden of becoming a man. He watched as the 500 Apache warriors rode away, their horses fading into the horizon, leaving only golden dust trailing behind. Like a long ribbon fluttering in the wind, there were no cheers, no drums, only the sacred silence of those who had just fulfilled a solemn promise. Eamon stood, filled with gratitude and pride. He knew that in this moment, he had crossed the threshold of boyhood. From a trembling child beneath a tree, he had become a man who would carry loyalty forever. My friends, in a land where violence is often the law of the land, there are still good people who rise quietly, like lights that never go out. They do not seek fame or reward. They simply do what is right, because their hearts tell them to. And it is gratitude, something so small it is often overlooked, that holds us steady, that connects lives which once seemed worlds apart, because sometimes one act of kindness can save an entire life, or even an entire generation. It has been an honor to serve you. I truly wish you peace and happiness always. I love you, our dear audience of Wild West storytelling. Let me know what you thought of this story. Leave a comment down below. Type the number 8 if you enjoyed this tale. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more thrilling stories from the Wild West.